Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday morning show. Today, we are going to be discussing landlord licensing, and as your rental property properly affected by this, and which license you will need. Now, it's not the most interesting subject, but we're going to cover it today. And what's your thoughts on this, Jim?
Every single landlord in Scotland will have to sit an exam. I'll guarantee you. This is what's coming, and we're going to talk about this in here, about the qualifications that every single landlord will have. But I guarantee you in the future that will happen. Every single landlord, all you self-managed landlords, will have to be qualified to a certain level, as per the government level, or you're no longer allowed to let a property. I know it's going to happen at some point in time. You better watch out for it. We're going to talk about this in selective licensing as well. And we're also going to talk about why property licenses will matter and why it's so important to the government to raise the standards in the private rented sector. I know we think, oh no, another burden, but it's coming, whether you like it or not. If you're a self-managed landlord, if you're an investor, if you're a property investor, it shouldn't put you off, because we'll talk about a wee bit more on why it's important, but also how probably it'll be a light touch approach, but I will talk about it throughout this. On the various subjects that we're talking about, or how it applies, how it will come into force, all the different things, because I know it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about the UK as a whole, and it differs across the whole of the UK licensing, and as it's known here in Scotland as landlord registration. But a lot of landlords don't have much of an idea whether their rental property requires to be registered or have a license, and that's where a lot of people start to get caught out. And as I say, there are different rules across the UK for landlord licensing, and it differs between local authorities, and they aren't always very communicative, the local authorities, about or loud on what the policy is, but they are around issuing the fines. So you need to watch that you're keeping yourself right, because you will get caught out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a misnomer as well, remember, Richard. I mean, you said, and I'm not trying to pick you up on it, but be careful what we're actually trying to say here, because landlord licensing and landlord registration are two different things.
Two different things, yeah, I know.
Yeah. And landlord registration is how they've got you, and this is how they're going to get you in terms of making sure you're licensed and also making sure you're suitably qualified. Because you're on the register already. You can't get away with it now. They've got you. They've basically got you by the short and curlies, to be honest. For want of a better phrase, and I know I definitely feel it's going to be coming at some point in time. I remember going way back and says at some point in the future, in 1999 when I stood up, for some point in the future, you will all be made to be going to register, and everybody went ha ha ha. And I went, I bet you it's happening. I bet you it will happen at some point in time. When the registration came along, it's only a matter of time before they think something else up, and I think it's coming. I do think it's coming, and you have to be prepared for it. And this is what we're going to talk about as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's potential for, many thousands of pounds in penalties and things that could be issued by councils and local authorities for not adhering to your licensing or registration in your local authority or in your area. And it's essential that you need to understand how the licenses work. So we're going to try and cover that today with that in mind and look at the main points. So we're going to look at initial usage, Jim. Why does property license actually matter? What are the different types of licenses across the UK? How does licensing rules differ across the UK? And what does landlord licensing cost? So there's different costs in different, obviously, regions of the.
How do landlords apply for a license as well as one that will finish at the end? But again, it's not just Scotland we're going to be talking about here. It's England as well, and Wales, and Northern Ireland, and all the rest of it. And this will probably apply to you as well, because as soon as it happens here, because we're usually the people that do it first, we're the draconian people that actually put the bureaucracy on other people without actually thinking about it, because they think it's a good idea. But as soon as that happens, you'll find that England will end up following suit, because the parties are in alignment with each other. They're both more or less socialist. Let's be honest. Both governments are socialist, whereas completely different avenue in America, where Trump's just like, let's go for it, laissez-faire. It's the market will decide, and regulation is getting chucked out the window. Whereas we're completely different in this in the United Kingdom and Great Britain.
Yeah, and although I say obviously it's maybe not the most interesting subject for everybody, but I mean it can be quite a meaty subject, and there's quite a lot involved in it. And as you see, as we start to explore the options of people being educated to a certain level before they could rent or manage tenancies and things is quite an interesting approach. So, but we're going to break it down and try and get through these today, and then we get kind of bite-sized kind of morsels as we go through this this morning. But why does property licenses matter as the first thing I think that people will ask? And Jim, I mean, it's quite, you mentioned there about back in the beginning when, I mean, you were involved in that whole landlord registration process and things at the beginning here in Scotland. So, I mean, why does it matter?
Oh, God, they're more than just a legal formality, I suppose. They're a critical tool for ensuring quality more than anything. See, this is what landlord registration doesn't do. This is what I said. You know, property licenses ensure things like quality and accountability in the rental market, and that's why they matter overall. Whereas landlord registration is just like, yeah, you're on a register, we know you rent property, but nobody's doing any checks really. They're doing these sporadic checks. You know, well, when I come up for landlord registration and I come up for renewal, they just go, could you send X amount of percentages a year? We'll just randomly pick these properties, your EICRs, your gas certificates, your smoke detector check, and all the rest of it. Yeah, and then I just pass it on to you, and you do it all.
And the way it used to be,
that's why you should have a letting agent.
Landlord registration, the way it used to be is it was 10% of all new applications. Now it's 10% of all new and renewal applications.
I think, and again, as I said, the property license, let's actually confuse it with regulation, I suppose, with a standard, an exam that you maybe have to pass. Now, I'll be honest, as letting agents, we have to pass these exams. And if the letting agents have to pass the exams based on the Scottish government, then I suppose they're thinking to themselves, well, why should private landlords get away with it then? Are not using a letting agent. So a letting agent is held to a higher standard, and a private landlord isn't held to a higher standard. Let's play devil's advocate in terms of that. So this sort of landlord licensing, the property license, so it would be a property license, shows that the landlord is committed to providing probably that secure and compliant property, while also giving tenants peace of mind in their home. It's safe and well maintained. It's easy to say. You know, the legislation quite clearly says that. But as I said before, who's checking? I am the admin. I am the admin for the Scottish Property Network, right? There's over 10,000 people on it. And now and again, quite often, I get landlords trying to put adverts on to rent their properties to people, okay? Because there is tenants on there as well, and there's sellers and buyers on there as well, selling their properties, buying properties. And they put them on, and before they come on, they go to me for approval first sometimes. And there's no registration number in there. There's no EPC in there. That, you know, and as well, what makes it even worse, it's like there's some of them say no pets. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute, you can't. No DSA. Wait a minute. What are you playing at? And this shows me straight away then that the Scottish government are bound to at some point in time say, this is ridiculous when they get round to it. This is ridiculous. Letting agents are abiding by this law, but there's more self-managing landlords than there is letting agents. So when you look at it in that prospect, and it's difficult to police for them, but actually making sure somebody sat some competent exam. This is what it's all about. I'm going through the advanced diver for PADI just now, which is the qualification for scuba diving. So I've done my scuba diving, which is up to 16 meters, and I've done my dry suit course, which is up to 60 meters, and it's multiple choice and it's all online. And this will happen with landlords at some point in time. There'll be a multiple choice exam, and you'll have to sit it, and there'll be videos and everything on it. So it won't be really that difficult, but that will happen. It will come.
It's kind of like your theory test for your driving as well. That's all multiple choice. And
as the National Landlord Association years and years ago, when I was their rep, or I was their chairman for Scotland, I was part of the National Landlord Association, which is now the NRFL, which is the National Residential Landlord Association, the biggest in Britain. I was their chairman for Scotland, and at that time they had an actual online course for voluntary for landlords that wanted to do it. So it was easy for them to do. So I think it could be easily replicated. So what I'm saying is, it will happen. But the great thing is, people like me have evidence already about the light touch approach and how easy it could be implemented, rather than having to get landlords who have to pay hundreds and hundreds of pounds to try and get qualified in hours and hours of sitting exams to try and get qualified to rent one property. Yeah. What's the point? You may as well just give it to a letting agent and forget about it.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line there. You're either going to have to do the exam, or you're probably going to end up having to give it to a letting agent if you're not going to do the exam, to make sure, because the letting agents are obviously qualified already. So I think that will end up coming, but because it does show that you're complying. I was a charter marked landlord through Fife Council. I sat exams way before landlord registration. I was charter marked. Yep. And we were charter marked as letting agents as well. We were approved by Fife Council. That was their charter mark, and you had to make sure you were showed the competency at a certain level before you were actually, and then you went on their golden list to refer clients that were potentially homeless to you as a result. So and that, I think, will end up coming at some point in time. I think it's going to be in the near future. I think it's going to be pushed for.
I wouldn't be surprised that it's not too far off in the future. Yeah.
Well, if you fail to, if it happens, or any sort of licensing scheme, why property licenses are in place, you've got serviced accommodation have to have licenses now.
Yeah.
Student HMOs have to have licenses now. So why no single unit properties? Why not residential properties? And it's nervousness, because then landlords will leave the market. They won't. They won't, because it can be done in a light touch approach. But as I said, if you fail to obtain licenses, any other things like when you look at serviced accommodation and you look at student accommodation and the HMOs and that, if you fail to obtain a license and qualify properly, you won't be able to do things like serve notice on your tenants or take legal action to regain possession of your property.
Regain your possession, yeah, that's a really important one, and people don't appreciate that. Without the right licenses, if you've not got them in place, you're going to struggle if that's what you need to do and regain possession of your property.
Because you're caught red-handed renting a property without the proper licenses, and when it comes to that, and it's getting more draconian for eviction, and the way the legislation's going as well, it's going to be more challenging. Now they have the option; they can charge landlords tens of thousands of pounds, and they could be forced to repay up to 12 months' rent as well in certain cases. And in the case of persistent offenders, they could actually be banned from renting. They could be removed from the landlord registration register and banned from actually renting. I'll be honest, they could just put it in their wife's name or their husband's name or their secretary's name, work, or their business name or anything like that, as long as they've not got a connection with it. So that's not going to really do anything as such, but the fine is there as an option for them to do. And I have been reading in the things like Landlord Zone newsletter, people have actually been getting huge fines down in England for this, for not doing things properly. It's a hell of a fine, and that's even at point of trying to evict people. So they're trying to evict them, and then the court finds out they've done something wrong in the process, and then they go, actually, you're going to be due them money. You're going to have to pay money back to them. Like, what? Well, you weren't. You weren't complying. You weren't complying for 6 months of that tenancy because you had failed to get an EICR renewed, or you had failed to get a gas safe certificate renewed. So therefore, as far as I'm concerned, the solicitor, the person in charge of the court, what do you call them again?
Adjudicators.
The adjudicator, first teacher, by the way. The adjudicator, actually, the judge, there you go, the judge and the other one, the county courts. The judge turns round and says, well, as far as I'm concerned, you weren't due rent for the last 6 months.
Yeah. And there's no argument for that.
Yeah, they can't say, oh, well, that's no fair. It's like, well, you weren't even renting them a legally compliant property. And if you're going to really be that much about it, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to nail you for it then. And you were breaking the law, and then we're going to fine you even more if that's the case. So I think you maybe just take this hit right now and pack up your bags and go, and possibly just, to be honest, just leave the market, sell up your property, don't be a landlord anymore, because you just give us a bad reputation.
Yeah, it does have a knock-on effect and a reputation kind of smear on the rest of the industry and people within the industry, I have to say. But it's also worth mentioning when we talk about licensing that councils can restrict licenses in areas where it's a bit overwhelmed and things. So it's worth to check up-to-date rules. And I mean, they've done that in some Yeah.
That's where it'll be a really good one when you think about it, for councils to say there's too many properties for let in that street or renting in that street. We're going to restrict some of the licenses. And again, that's another thing that could come as a result of that.
Yeah.
So there will be a desire to do that. Definitely. Somebody's going to, well, if I've thought it, somebody else is going to think it. And it's got to be out there in ether somewhere. This is a great idea to do for the councils. That's ultimately what rent controls is going to do as well. They're going to try and do rent, when they're doing rent controls in Scotland, they're going to try and get it down to, they're maybe even going to get it down to a couple of streets that they're going to apply, the local authority can apply the rent controls on. Wow. It's like just a couple of streets. It's like, what? Really?
Yeah, I suppose if that's, yeah.
Again, yeah, I've been reading up about it and all the different things. And I think, God almighty, but then it's down to local authority. It's not down to the government. The government will put it in place, but it would be down to local authority. There's a couple of things in there, by the way. The rent controls legislation are complete and utter fabricated lies. They're playing a game of poker, because I know, and they don't know, they will now, that I know that some of the stuff that they're saying is illegal. It contravenes the European Union legislation, which we're still part of, and they can't do it. So that'll be interesting, because they're still using it as a bargaining chip. Honestly, they're still using it as a bargaining chip. They're still saying, oh, well, we'll do this and we'll do that. But I tell you what, we might take this away if you agree to that. It's like, hey,
you can't do that.
You can't take that away anyway, because you can't even do it in the first place. So that'll be an interesting conversation in the future. That will come up, by the way.
I imagine it will.
I'm throwing it away. And these are the sort of things that can happen. So you have a bit more a handle on this. What are the different types of property licenses then across the country?
Yeah, so property licenses, yeah. And just for people in Scotland that are watching, obviously we're talking about the entire UK here. So there are 3 license categories for private rental homes, and the permits you require depends on what type of property and the way it's configured, and sometimes even its location. So mandatory license applies to all rental homes across the UK with 5 or more people living in a property who form 2 or more households. That makes sense. All right. And these are automatically classed as HMOs.
Okay.
That's the classification, and that's how they ascertain what an HMO is. Additional licensing covers smaller HMOs with 3 or potentially 4 residents, with terms chosen at the local authorities level to address specific challenges around housing quality and overcrowding and things. So it does differ slightly between the authorities. But yeah, there's smaller HMO licenses for 3 to 4 residents. And then the third one is selective licensing, which relates to individual streets or areas specified by local councils. And in these zones, every rental property, from HMOs to student flats and family homes and things, require licenses. So that's obviously, remember, we're talking about the UK as a whole here.
Yeah.
And finally, as I say, obviously local authorities can stop issuing licenses in particular neighbourhoods. So if you're a landlord in Scotland and unsure where you stand, things, obviously speak to us about what the rules are to you. But that's the example I would think about them restricting licenses in places. A good example here in Scotland is the HMO licensing in St Andrews.
Yeah, good example. Yeah.
Yeah, because they took that away because obviously there was such a vast volume of HMO licensing, and they had a lot of heat from residents and things as well.
Effectively, they just woke up one day and thought, we're going to take this away. And it's like all of a sudden, some other people's investment future has gone just like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think that's what the concern is when it comes to stuff like that. The concern is they could just take something away, and then you're left with, you've not got anything now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And as I say, it does vary across the country, and we're going to look at how the licensing rules differ across the entire UK. And the rules and for which rental homes need a license does vary between England and Scotland and Wales, but also from one local authority to another. So as a general overview, every landlord who is in Wales, for example, must register for landlord licensing, and they must complete 5 to 6 hours of training to obtain a 5-year Rent Smart Wales license, which is quite a good thing, actually, I think. That's a really good thing. Here in Scotland, all landlords need to be registered with their council covering their property's location, and licenses usually, well, licenses, I say registration usually lasts for 3 years. Well, I say usually, it does last for 3 years. So landlord registration is a 3-year period. In England, mandatory licensing only applies to large HMO properties, which is what I says there when I defined what an HMO was there just previously. The smaller HMO licensing and selective licensing zones are set by the local authorities, which licenses last 12 months.
Okay.
You can see how it differs across the country, whether it's England, Wales, or Scotland. To end on some good news, using a managing agent allows you to sidestep the need to have the training and the qualifications, or even possibly the application process and things as well in certain areas. So if you'd rather spend your time on other things, use an agent. That's probably the best advice.
Yeah.
But I think, and definitely in the situation there in Wales, where you have to attend X amount of hours for training and things to have your proper license in place and be able to operate, I think is a really good thing, because it then professionalizes the industry. And as you say, Jim, I think in the very near future, it's something that is going to be enforced. And I'm all for that, especially being an agent that has to be qualified. And agents not only have to obtain the qualification, we need to keep it running. I need to continually train to keep our letting agent registration in place and live and active. So, I mean, it's an ongoing thing. It's not just let's do a course and that's it done. It's an ongoing educational thing.
Okay.
So I do think it is important. And if in doubt, use an agent. I think if you're not got the time to put in to learn these things or to professionalize the industry as a self-managed landlord, then use an agent.
I'd imagine most people are landlords are in a professional capacity somehow, probably earning a hell of a lot more money than it would cost to actually get an agent to manage their property. So why would you try and want to try and do it yourself to save a few quid? I still think that goes back to the school mentality, the worker mentality, trading time for money. It's that sort of thing where being a landlord, an investor landlord isn't about that. It's actually about breaking free of that equation. So time is no longer equal to money. You don't trade time for money anymore. This is why I talk about the first, how you could buy one property and you could make £20,000 an hour. Yeah, £20,000 an hour buying one property. And it's like, how is that possible? How is that possible? And this is, if you don't understand how that's possible, then you don't understand how to be an investor landlord then. If that's the case, you're still in that time and money equation. You still don't understand how to break free of that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you exactly how that is. You're buying one property, and just say for argument's sake, it's going to be £100,000. Now, you're probably going to spend about 5 hours in total finding that property, viewing that property, organising the finance, solicitor, getting the keys, job done, handing it to the letting agent, ready to go. Probably about 5 hours. Now, in the next 20 years, that property will probably definitely double. I know it does, because it's gone up 4% every single year. As salaries go up and affordability goes up, and mortgages get more competitive, and they push out the 25 to 35 year, they're getting lifetime and all the rest of it. And rents go up as well. You're guaranteed that property will go up as well at the same time. Yeah, I do say guaranteed the property will go up. It does. It's just the way it is. It's just the way inflation works. It's just the way how they inject credit into the economy, and then all of a sudden that money disappears, but it's still there. And that's because inflation pushes all the prices up and everything costs a bit dearer. Same with property. So it will go up. So it will probably double over the next 20 years. So if it doubles over the next 20 years, you made it 100,000. But you've just spent 5 hours and that's it on it. So effectively, you've got 100,000. You spent 5 hours on it. So that's 20 grand an hour. Because you ain't managing it from now on. You've handed it to a letting agent. If you're self-managing, it's going to cost you a fortune. You're back at time versus money again. You're back in time versus money again. You're on the time-money equation again. If you're self-managing, if you've got a letting agent doing it and you're not getting involved in it anymore, and they're capable and competent of doing it, and I will say capable and competent. There's quite a few that aren't, as far as I'm concerned. It's not because I'm a letting agent. It's because I've used them over the years, because I've been in it for over 30 years, and they're diabolical still. Hence the reason why we run our own ship.
Mm-hmm.
We built our own stage for that very reason. So effectively, if you're getting 100,000 in the next 20 years, and you've only spent 5 hours on it because you've handed it to a letting agent, and the running costs are covered by all the rent that comes in, and everything else is paid, and you get a wee bit of profit out of that. So that's not even into the equation either. Then you're effectively securing, just like when you write a book, £20,000 an hour you're making because you've spent 5 hours on it, and that's it. That's exactly how they do it in a book. An author royalties. That's it. They write a book, they spend all that time on it, and then they sell it, and it sells over the... I mean, look at Think and Grow Rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's still selling now. Look at 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. I think that's Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
He's dead.
It's still
making money.
Yeah.
And he's not working anymore. He's not here. He's no trading time for money. He's still making money on that book. That's what people don't realise.
Yeah.
The work that he put in the beginning is going up. And the work he did is going up every single hour he's getting paid for. Higher and higher. Every single hour he put in, he's getting paid for. And that's exactly with property. The 5 hours, and I'm assuming 20 years. If it goes up quicker, then it's that. And if it doubles, it triples. And if it goes 40 years and it doubles again, that means your £20,000 an hour is no longer 20 grand an hour you made. It's £40,000 an hour. Because you still only spent 5 hours in the beginning. And you've had it for 40. So when you pass it to your grandkids and you pop your clogs, you're still making a higher amount per hour.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Go, boom, and you have to get a carrier bag to carry your brains in because you're just blowing your brains out. It's like, oh my God, you'll never sleep properly again if you understand this. Honestly, when I understood the compounding and how this works and how time does not equal money and understood how to properly invest and how it compounds, it's like I never slept the same ever since.
Mm-hmm.
I slept a lot better, by the way.
I was just going to say I slept better.
It's like, oh my God, imagine going to sleep and getting up in the morning and being wealthier.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what you've done.
Yeah.
30 years ago.
What you've put in place, yeah.
My capital gains bill is going to be 200,000, by the way. Yes. I know your eyebrows went up.
It's like, a lot, yeah.
But my capital gains bill next year, probably next year, because by the time I get over the line, it's probably going to be next year. My capital gain, and this is only a small part of what I've got. If my capital gains bill is 200,000, divide that by the 0.24. That means if it's 200,000 and divided by 0.24, that means I've effectively my gain is 833,000. It gives you an idea, and that's a small part of it.
Yeah,
I'm all right paying 200,000 because I'm making 600,000 out of it. That's a good deal. That's more than somebody's superannuation or pension that they'll ever get. They think they've won the lottery when they get that, and it's like I'm doing it on one deal.
Yeah, it just shows
30 years. 30 years. That's paying me for everything I did 30 years ago, because that is the properties that I bought 30 years ago.
Yeah.
30 and 25 years ago, I bought these properties. That's mental.
That is.
Aye. So anybody, I'll defy you to say that you can't make money in property, because time and patience and compounding will guarantee you that wealth.
I was just going to say, a lot of people don't grasp that because they try and look at the quick gain and don't think about it over the long term. I mean, that's obviously a really good return, and yeah.
That's what they do. They don't look in the future. They just look at what's on happening now. Oh my God, it's no fair. It's no working. Oh, it's like, oh, everybody on social media is saying it's rubbish. Everybody on social media is saying, I couldn't give a shit about everybody on social media.
Yeah.
I know what the numbers are, and I know it works, and I know it's just a matter of time. It's like somebody came on and said to me, oh, it's going to be a crash in 2 years' time. I couldn't care less if it was going to be a crash. It'll make no difference to me at all. Because my loan to value is really low. So a correction is not going to make any difference to me. And I've got all my properties occupied, and they're all at levels that the local housing allowance can cover it. So why am I bothered? It's not going to, my risk is completely, extremely low. So, and hey, it's going to be a property crash. It's like, and your point is what? What is your point? I was right. I'm right. Okay. There's one thing in this world, and it was Keith Cunningham, rich dad, not Kiyosaki. Kiyosaki wrote about Keith Cunningham, who's rich dad. He was the rich dad. Keith says, Jim, you could be right or you could be rich, but you can't be both. But on this occasion, I'm both.
Because that's quite interesting. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think it's the mentality of people that kind of look or have the patience to wait, and that delayed gratification thing. Definitely.
It reminds me. It's like I don't like saying that either, to be honest. But I do say it for sarcasm. I think just because I don't take myself too seriously, but. It does remind me of Richard Branson. Richard does not like getting called a billionaire.
Right.
He detests it. He squirms when you say that to him. It's quite interesting. So he doesn't like the idea because he never did things for money. He just did it to change stuff, and it just so happened to be money as a result.
Money doing it, yeah.
That's all he was doing.
That was a byproduct, yeah.
Let's get back and talk about where are we just now then? What we're talking about?
But we'll round it back to licensing and things, and talking about money, what it actually costs, and what are the charges and things involved in landlord licensing. And it does vary again across the UK, and prices are set nationally. So in Scotland and Wales, but devolved to individual local authorities and things in England, so it's a wee bit different. So the principal fee for landlord registration in Scotland is they're about £80, and then the additional £18 is payable per property register. So in general terms, you're talking about £100 to register a property with Fife Council or any other local authority in Scotland to register your property for let, and that lasts for 3 years.
So Dundee, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Fife, Moray, Stirlingshire, they're all the same right across Scotland. It's the same amount of money. That's all it is. What about well, actually, I'll tell you what, even though you don't register, nobody knows anyway.
No, I mean you do leave yourself open if you don't do that, and I think
obviously, right, because if you try to evict somebody and they find out you're not registered, you're screwed.
Yeah, no chance.
So get yourself registered. However, there's no policing of the whole thing. There's no joined up thinking the way it's done. It's my big criticism when they set up landlord registration, and I was on board with it, to be honest. I was on board with it because we got all the concessions and we pulled it right back. They were wanting. We were ultimately at the time what the Scottish government proposed, that they came round and did the consultations, and I was sitting in the room. And they said things like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be able to somebody to type your name in and they'll know every single property you own. Sorry? You're going to allow somebody to type my name in and they'll get to know every property I own. Can I get a note of your bank account? Could you tell me how much is in your bank right now? And they went, I'm not telling you that. I said, so why have I got to do it then with my property?
Yeah.
I went, oh, I never thought of that. It says, what happens if Paul Ferris, the Glasgow Mafia at the time, what happens if he comes across and he sees the register and he types in my name and he sees all the property I've got and then he says, I tell you what we'll do. If you don't pay me money, I'll find all your properties. Yeah. And they went, oh, we never thought of that either. Oh, shit. It's like, we better go back to the drawing board.
I think that, yeah, definitely.
And then the other one was, and we're going to let everybody know where you live. And I'm like, wait a minute. Even Companies House don't allow that. Even Companies House say you can do it, or you can select an alternative address. So you're telling me we don't have an option to select an alternative address? And it went, no. I went, okay. So if somebody then looks up my address in my personal house, comes round and assaults me because they're not happy with one of my tenants and how it's running. Yeah. It'll be on your head then. Oh, we never thought of that either. Oh, shit.
And a lot of landlords.
And that's why you've got what you've got today. Whereas you can only type in the landlord and they can opt to have a contact address for someone, or they can put their own home address, but they can opt to have a contact address, could be a lawyer or a letting agent or something like that. But they don't have a direct telephone number. They've just got an address you can write to. And then the other one is, you can then go to a property and you can put that in, and then you can find out who actually has that property and the contact details for just that one property.
Yeah.
So you can just get it on one property, or you can just find out if that landlord is actually registered as a landlord. That's all you can do, which is exactly what you should be able to do.
And that's the beauty of having a letting agent as well, because I advise all our managed landlords to use our office address on the landlord registration.
Yeah, because as I said, I've had it. I had it where somebody came round to the house and basically tried to have a go at me, and it wasn't even my property.
Yeah, but they thought it was yours.
I immediately assumed it was like a mob. It's like they all came round the house, and I was feeding Tony, and so that she was about 6 months old, and her handshake, I opened the door, and it's like, I'm gonna get, and it's like, what the hell are you talking about? She's screaming and greeting at 6 months old, and I had to phone the police.
Yeah,
and it's like, it wasn't even my property. They thought they would just take it with me because I'm the person that put my head above the parapet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that, and that's a prime example of how that could go horribly wrong.
So this is why it needs people like, dare I say, me, to be under, because I understand the whole system and how it works. Yeah. In terms of if it ever comes into the fact that we're going to start registering landlords, we're going to make sure they're qualified. We're going to give the public even more details about them. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Let's look at this. Let's look at what can happen and what you could end up doing and causing. And they'll be, because they don't know, they're academics. Civil servants are academics. They just write speeches and come up with policies for government ministers to stand up and spout on about and think and talk about as if they know something about it. It's like they don't.
They're just reciting what's written in front of them. Yeah.
Yeah. How could the minister for business end up being the minister for the housing when he's never been in housing ever? And how could he know everything from day one? He can't.
No.
And he never will. He never will. He'll never know what we know. And that's why they need to consult the private rented sector. They need to have a body of people, just like the Trump. It's like, oh, I'm going to get Musk, I'm going to get him, and I'm going to get him, and I'm going to, because I know all these people are in business and they know exactly how the world works and all the rest of it. And these are the people I'm going to have as advisors. Yeah. Our government doesn't do things like that. They just read. Consultation documents. I think they have a meeting now and again with Sal, but I think it's just an appeasement meeting.
And I was just going to say to appease us,
yeah, because the legislation says they've got to consult. There is a bit in legislation which I'm completely aware of. The government has to consult all tenures of interest in the housing sector in order to when they formulate a policy. So this is why they try and get away with just consulting one or two people, or putting
out a minimum, basically,
sneaky questionnaires about, oh, we did consult you because we put out this questionnaire on the 1st of January in 2023 or something, and it's like, okay,
and asked like 50 people or something.
Aye, and we sent it out to everybody, and all right, who did you send it out to? Oh, well, I sent it to my auntie. I sent it to my pals. I'm just making light of that, but that's the type of things to come up with. Sometimes you think, oh my god, you obviously don't understand how to do this. So that's the thing. So what about Wales then, for people that are in Wales?
Yeah, so that was landlord registration in Scotland. Registration in Wales costs £187, and the Rent Smart Wales license, which I talked about doing these 5 or 6 hours training, is £30 when you do the training and complete it online, which is probably like these multiple choice things that we spoke about. Or you could pay £100 and do a physical classroom setting for that qualification.
So if Wales has got it already, the Rent Smart, 5 to 6 hours, why that's why they should make it mandatory then in Scotland. This is what will come, because they'll see it in Wales, and because this is how registration, this is how landlord accreditation came out. This is voluntary landlord accreditation. This is how letting agent registration came out, because of Charter Mark from Fife Council. And Edinburgh Council saw it and thought, oh, that's a great idea. And then Edinburgh Council did it. And then they thought, the Scottish Government then thought, well, why do we not do it right throughout the whole of Scotland? Yeah. And that's how it all came about. All because of, Fife Council leading the way as usual.
Yeah. So that's how things work in Wales. And then England, the cost is set by each local authority, and it's generally between about £300 and £400. Licenses are issued for a period of 12 months at a time, as I said previously as well, and you have to reapply each 12 months or annually.
Yeah.
And
so this is licenses for HMOs, this is licenses for possibly service accommodation, stuff like that. It's not licensed to be a landlord, by the way.
No.
But this will start to get used a bit more. I know. Look at Andy Burnham in the Manchester area. I mean, he's in charge. He's the mayor for Manchester area, and I was speaking to him at Glastonbury about it, and he seems pretty draconian about the whole thing. He doesn't like private landlords. It's pretty obvious by what he was saying. But I still introduced myself. We had a wee chat, and but it was still clear. And I said, look, you know, you need to take a light touch approach at this. Look what Scotland's done, and try and avoid doing that, because they've scared off a lot of landlords, and they've been left with a homelessness crisis way beyond what could have been expected because of their draconian policy. So please take note of that, I said to him. And he said, yeah, I will. Clearly he doesn't know. Typical politician. Yeah, I will. And it's like,
at least you said it.
Typical politician. What's he talking about? That's typical, eh? And they do that as soon as you turn their back, they just go, aye, okay then. Right, let's put legislation in.
On the next thing, yeah. But yeah, so
councils really are, and they are enlisting existing enlisting tenants to catch non-compliant landlords. But I don't think they're because most tenants don't know anyway.
No.
And with fines to hundreds of thousands of pounds, it's not really worth trying to cheat the system, given the potential penalty overall.
It isn't worth the risk, and I think if you're going to be serious about being a landlord, then it would pay to just follow the system that's in place.
I caught them out, big time one time. I deliberately didn't register 3 properties for about 3 years. Yeah, because I was on their panel at the time. I was on the housing partnership panel and representing private landlords' interests in the early 2000s. And when it came in, I deliberately didn't register 3 properties. And I left it for about 3 years, and eventually sat at one of the meetings, and they were going on about how great they were doing, how many they've got registered, how everybody's rolling up to do it, and how they're catching everybody. And I went, well, fun enough, I've had 3 properties not registered for 3 years, and it was a light touch approach at that time. But I did it just for that reason, to see if they would actually catch up with them, and they never. The reason I did it is because we were able to close a loophole. It was happening, and that's why. Because then, how did we no notice that then? And I said, well, it's because of this. And the way to get that is to be able to check all these websites and check all the Rightmove and Zoopla and all the rest of it. Make sure everybody's got the landlord registration number. Just do audit checks and stuff like that, and then you'll eventually get to know. Because Open Rent and Renter are 2 websites that self-managed landlords use. So it's an easy way to police it. And pick it up over time and just audit it. That was the loophole as a result of that. So that's the reason I did it. But I could highlight probably inaccuracies in it now and how people can circumvent it. That's why I said at the beginning. It's like, I don't think. But if you try to tell them, sometimes it just falls on deaf ears. And the reason for that is because you're not really telling the people in charge. You're actually just trying to tell an employee who are like, I'm not bothered. It's like, is it 5 o'clock yet?
Yeah,
I just want to go in. It's like I didn't want to listen to this. I just want to do my job. That's how some people are.
Do what I need to do and leave.
Yeah. So for me, I'm quite passionate about the whole thing. If you're going to do it, you better bloody well do it right. That's as far as I'm concerned, because right means everybody's on a level playing field. Doing it incorrectly means there's other people getting away with murder.
Yeah.
In a
not physical murder, I know what you mean.
An analogy sense. There's a lot of people getting away with murder. Next minute we're banned from Facebook and because we mentioned murder. So that's the sort of things you've got to watch out for, and it's not worth the penalty, to be honest. It's, as I said, it's 80 quid to register yourself. It's 18 quid for the property for 3 years. Is that really incumbent? If that's a problem to you as a landlord, you've got more things to worry about than just that. Then, if that's the case, of 18 quid, something you can't afford. If you can't afford to join a landlord association, for example, 125 quid a year to get the proper advice and get access to discounts and stuff like that as well, it'll pay dividends for you, and it's tax deductible, by the way. So if you're a 40% taxpayer, that 125 would end up really truly costing you 75 quid.
If
you're a basic taxpayer, that 125 will end up costing you £100 a year. It's nothing really in the scope of things, and it keeps you compliant and right, and it keeps you ready helpline overall to get access into.
Yeah, but even if you're using an agent, your agent fees and things are tax deductible as well.
Yes, that's another thing people have to think about. This again is time and money. This is this equation. People think I could save myself £80 a month. Well, you're not saving yourself £80. If you're a higher rate payer, or corporation tax, for example, which 25%, your £80 is really £60. Because your corporation tax, you're getting a deduction you're against your corporation tax if you're an unlimited company. If you're a higher rate payer, your £80 is actually only £48 that you're paying. If you can't afford £4 a month
to look after your property, to have
£4
somebody look
a month. Sorry, £4, £48 a month. I was going to say, but £48 divided by 30, just say 30 days, £1.60 a day.
Couple of pounds a day.
Aye. The first hour in a month, the first hour you've gassed it. If the letting agents have to be on for a couple of hours, you won out of that. You've saved yourself money, because you could be out earning a hell of a lot more than £48 with the 2 hours that you've got. If you're a professional at what you do, or if you're a high paid job that you've got as well, work that out. If you're an investor as well, if you could buy another property, if you've got an opportunity to look at other properties and buy another property, again, as I said before, 5 hours, you can lock in 20 grand an hour for the £48 that you're trying to save. 20 grand, £48. Yeah. Hey, 20 grand. Obviously. McFly, is it getting through yet? Is it getting through to you yet? Do you truly understand what you've got in front of you here? The vehicle that could set you free. Financial freedom.
Yeah.
If you do it right. Right. It's not a case of just buying some properties and sitting on them and self-managing them. That is not the right way to do it. Anyway, let's talk about the final bit.
No, you're absolutely right.
Do the landlords apply for a license?
Yes. So let's round up and see how people do apply for a license, and indeed registrations and things as well. And landlord licenses applications can be made online for the most part. In fact, for all, to be honest. And you'll be asked to supply a number of details depending on where your property is in the UK. So it might differ slightly. A given is the full name and address of every person or organisation or limited company or whatever that with the ownership interest on the property. Okay. You'll also need the all-important energy performance certificate, gas certificate, electrical certificate, carbon monoxide detection, smoke alarms. You'll have to provide evidence of all of that, and you'll probably be asked for proof of your landlord's insurance policy as well. Okay. So these, and that's again, these are all standard things that you need to have in place and be able to show the evidence of these. In the case,
everybody runs about and panics and think, God, I'm
yeah, no.
Because they've let their gas engineer off with saying, "Oh, I'll just send it on to you later," and it's like they've never ever sent it on. That's why a letting agent chases that up and gets that for you, so it saves you a hell of a lot of time and headaches for you trying to save yourself a few bob. That's amazing.
It's amazing. There's a few who use their own contractors and things, which is fine, but and they just don't understand the importance of us chasing the actual physical copy of the certificate, because unless I've got it on file,
Richard, broke thinking. That's what I call it. It's people that don't understand exactly what they've got in front of them and what they could actually, how they could actually invest for their future.
Yeah. And then in the case of HMOs, evidence that the accommodation is in fact suitable for the number of occupants that it's set up for, and also things including like the room sizes, the proper kitchen facilities, and sufficient bathrooms and bathing facilities and things as well. These all need to be correct and for the individual property, depending on the size and the occupants and things. But you need to provide evidence of that for your HMO licensing as well. Again, with HMOs, all HMOs need to have the fire risk assessment, and the local authorities may wish to arrange an inspection to ensure that their licence requirements are met. And it will differ slightly between local authorities and things for HMOs, but in general terms, that is what you will be required to do.
Yeah.
And then an additional one in Scotland as well, not to forget, is that if you own a rental property in Scotland, Legionella risk assessment is compulsory, and it will need to be shown as well that a Legionella risk assessment has been carried out on the property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've also got the lead pipe testing as well. Now I know there's a big backlog with that from when it was brought in last year, and but it still is a requirement that needs to be exercised.
Another thing, God,
Yeah.
It's like flipping heck, eh? It's like, when will it ever stop? But that's the way we're doing. And for people to turn around and sit and say, oh well, you can't put your rents up. I mean, with the CPI +1, consumer price index +1 for the rent increases every year, it's like, it's madness to think that that's the case. Again, the Scottish government just don't get it. They don't understand what's going on here. They don't understand where they are right now. It's just utter madness.
Yeah, and I think finally on the application process and things for licenses and registrations, and that it's also worth taking into consideration that local authorities will consider you as an individual, whether you're a fit or proper person, which means having no serious or unspent criminal convictions, and that includes offences relating to rental properties previously and things as well. They can audit that and look into that, and if they are not satisfied, you might not be granted your licence or your registration.
That's mental, eh? I mean, after all that time, and then somebody turn around and saying, by the way, you're not fit and proper person anymore. It's like, oh, wait a minute, how's that possible? I was all right yesterday. How all of a sudden it's like the gas engineers when they first started the gas safe certificates. Well, the gas engineers never had any qualifications. It was like, they were like, well, what do we do now? Because we're going to put certificates in place and none of these people are qualified, as opposed to the legislation. So that's why they had to say in the legislation that as long as you've got experience and you're a competent gas engineer, that's how they got away with it. And then obviously over time, they started to push all these people out. It didn't want to sit the exam and bring in new blood that would sit the exam. And it's kind of like, how the buy-to-let market will be as well, the investor market.
Yeah. Yeah, and with the gas, it used to be Corgi registered, and now it's gas safe registered contractors and things. And likewise with the electricians, they have to be select registered to sign off your electrics. Yeah, and that really rounds up the licensing and landlord licensing information for today. I know it does differ quite a lot across the country, but I think you get the general idea that things are changing and they will continue to change. And I think, like you say, Scotland might follow suit in terms of like what is happening down in Wales, and I think all for the better. I mean, what do you think, Jim? I do think that some level
I just think a light touch approach. It will be for the better, I would say, but it has to be a light touch approach. But then, as I said, it's about getting the right people in front of the government to actually influence them to that effect. If you've got, dare I say it, Richard? It's like I was reading the Times, an article in the Times, and you've got some of the highfalutin letting agents in Edinburgh. Making comments and that. I thought, these people have no idea what they're talking about. It's like they're just opening their mouth and letting their belly rumble. Yeah, it's like they're talking about markets. It's like, oh, it's £2,000 a month. That's not what mainstream landlording is. The average rent in Scotland is about £700 to £800 according to Zoopla a month. So how would they know what it's like for and what they should be doing and what the market's like for people? How would they know how tenants are? How would they know how, the desperation that tenants are in and all the rest of it? Because they didn't deal with the vulnerable people. They don't deal with the middle market. They deal with we only want to deal with the upper market.
Yeah, I know.
It's
not really the reality.
Motive about the whole thing, but and then they get some think tank on. It's has no idea either. They're academics. Oh well, we thought an analysis of the private renter sector, and we found that in these areas, there was the rent was on average 1,200. Oh, that'll do for us. The Scottish government says. It's like, well, wait a minute. What areas are you talking about? Oh well, Edinburgh, and Glasgow, and Perth. It's like, all right, okay, so we'll not take account of Dundee, we'll not take into account all the wee villages round about, Fife, for example, it's historically low rents to take that into account, because that's what brings it down to what Zoopla's saying.
Yeah.
We'll just legislate on the principle that everybody's going to have to pay £1,500 a month, and that's no fair. It's like, well, newsflash, folks, my average rent's 550 quid a month.
Yeah.
Perfectly affordable. So why am I getting brought into the rent control legislation if my average rent's low and affordable, the whole lot of it? Why am I getting dragged into it? Paul McLennan, why am I getting dragged into it?
Yeah, you've got a point, definitely.
I have exactly got a point. And that's the exact answer for most landlords.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they getting dragged into this if their rents are affordable? I was watching somebody's council house. They just got the new council house, and it's appalling. It's like smoke. Somebody been smoking in it. They never even cleared it or anything. All the wallpaper was covered in nicotine. All the carpets were disgusting, and all the rest of it. And I said, and she said to me, "That's a council house," and I went, "You're joking."
God, I would never hand a property over in that.
And I would say, you should go back to the council and complain about that. And she went, "Oh, I'm not really wanting it." And that's the problem. The council will set them on us, but they'll not set them on themselves. They'll not even have that standard for themselves.
Yeah.
I actually said, I'd be ashamed to rent a property like that.
Well, I would never even put it on the market and hand it over. No way.
I wouldn't even take the landlord on.
No.
It's like, just go somewhere else, mate. It's like, I'm not renting that for you.
No.
And yet the council, and effectively, that you could say they're a slum landlord in that case.
Well, you could, yeah.
I should go round and do a thing and go, "This is ridiculous. This is a slum landlord for you." And everyone will go, "This is appalling. This is appalling." Did you know it's the council's?
Did you know it's a council property? Yeah. That would be an interesting video.
Oh, that would be a great video. That would go viral everywhere.
It would.
But it's true. It's appalling. I said, go back and complain. I know they've got grants somewhere. They'll give you a grant or something like that to help you out, to help you do some of these things. But it's appalling that you've just been left to do it yourself. But did you know, though, Richard, that this has always been what the council's done? They've always just given their council houses out with bare floors.
Yeah, well, I did know that. Yeah, they don't put floor cover on.
I got a council house when I was homeless and unemployed, a one-bedroom property, a flat, an upper flat, and I could not afford to put carpets on it. I could not afford to furnish it. I couldn't afford to run it. So therefore, I had to give it up after 2 weeks.
Right.
I know exactly what it's like to be in that position.
And then
I don't think many people actually understand that. And I had to give it up because I couldn't afford it, because I was studying to be a student as well, which is even worse because you don't get full benefits if you study to be a student.
Like how you meant to better yourself?
Yeah. How you meant to get ahead if you're immediately penalised for becoming a student? And it's because they said you're not available for work. That's why we can't give you everything you need. So if I was to be unemployed, you'd give me more. Yeah, absolutely. We'd pay all your we'd pay all your rent for you. We'd give you we'll give you income support and everything like that as well. It's like, you're joking. So I would be better off being unemployed. Unfortunately,
and then trying to re-educate myself to get a better job.
I remember at one time I actually said to them, so I'm just going. I tell you what I'll do. I'll hand back the house and I'll go and sleep on the steps at Kirkcaldy District House, the town house. Yeah, I'll go and sleep on the steps. And you know what the person says to me? Well, that's your choice, Mr. Parker.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Why do you think I've got a real thing for councils and governments and all the rest of it? Because I completely understand what it's like for people, because I've been there before.
Yeah, in that situation, yeah.
And I think people just look at me and just think to themselves, "You're rich, you're wealthy." It's like, I'm rich and wealthy.
You don't know what it's like. Yeah.
You know, I got out of it, and I made sure, and I sacrificed a lot to get here at that point in time, and I still do that now. But anybody else can do that, what I did, and we teach it as a result in the Wealth Creation Show for that very reason. And anybody could do that if they want to.
Well,
they just have to do it. They have to pay a price.
The title for Monday's Wealth Creation Show is "Wounds to Wealth." So
there you go.
Quite a good one. So yeah, you could do this on Monday for that at 12:30. But in terms of landlord licensing and registration, any questions, my contact details, my number and my email are in this post. I can see some comments and things. I'm going to jump in and have a look at them. If on the rerun, still comment, guys, we'll come back to you. Thanks for all your insights today, Jim.
share it on your forum pages and all the rest of it, because everybody needs to know about this. Every landlord needs to know about it. Share it on your, for other people, share it on your own personal pages, because people that know you are landlords as well, and you're all interconnected. We need to get this out. We need to do something about this. We can't just allow the government just to railroad us again into something else without actually being proactive in the first instance. Say, yeah, we want to do this, and this is how we want to do it. But by the way, we want you to take rent controls away. There's the kicker, eh? There's a really good negotiating tool, eh? We'll do the 5 to 6 hour. We'll do the 5 to 6 hour exam. You take rent controls away.
Yeah. Okay, right. We'll leave it there today then. Thanks for that, Jim, and thanks to everybody for watching. We will see you next Saturday at 9:30 as usual.
Bye bye for now.
Bye.